Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome dear students. This is a video for the subject of education, for the course of Bachelor's in Education and for the paper of Educational Technology Part 2. This video lecture is based on communication and interaction, and the special focus of this lecture will be on the principles of communication. This video lecture is recorded by Dr. Iram Khan. The course coordinator and the presenter of this video is Dr. Iram Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. The academic expert or the reviewer of this video is Dr. Savita Kaushal from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha Channels of Ministry of Education, Government of India. Hello my dear students, I am Dr. Iram Khan, Assistant Professor at Institute of Advanced Studies in Education, Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today, we will be discussing about communication and interaction, and in this lecture, the topic will be focused on the principles of communication. Let us start the discussion first with the objectives. So the objectives of this session are to discuss the different principles of communication and to elaborate the principles of communication in detail. First of all, let us recall what exactly we mean by communication. We have already discussed that communication means transferring thoughts, information, ideas, emotions through gesture or voice or symbols, signs and expressions from one person to another. There are three major things or most important things which are essential in any type of communication or in the process of any form of communication. What are these three? They are the sender, the receiver and the channel, or we can also call it as the medium, channel or medium. So the sender is the encoding uh, entity of the message. So basically the sender encodes the message in any form like a voice or in a written form or in any of the sign forms. So they are often called as the encoders. So these senders can be explained or can be said as the encoders. The next one is the receiver. The receiver basically decodes. So the receiver is decoding the message from the sender to understand the message. So these receivers are often called as decoders. Now what is the third component? Any message or information needs some channel or a medium for transaction. So that particular medium is the third component. For example, let us take the example of a television program where there is audio and visual, both form of communication happening. So here the audio visual medium is basically decoded and the electronic signals are basically transformed into the audio visual forms, and those audio visual forms which are earlier in the form of electronic signals are now received by the audiences. So this is somehow like the recapitulation of what exactly we studied about the communication. Now, in this session, we will be discussing about the various principles of communication. So let us see that what exactly these principles are all about and what exactly are their role in the transforming various communications or in the form of the creators of various communications. So the principles of communication, when we discuss about these principles, communication can be considered as a two-way channel which requires certain basic principles. And these basic principles are essential to be observed for the effective outcomes or for an effective communication. So in this session, we will be focusing on these principles of communication one by one. The first principle of communication, which I will be discussing, is the principle of readiness and motivation. What exactly it means? Both the communicator and the receiver, it means the sender and the receiver, should be ready and remain motivated throughout the process of communication. If there is lack of interest or enthusiasm or a sort of readiness on the part of either of them, either the sender or the receiver, this is going to adversely affect the process and the products of communication. That is why this is taken up as the first principle of communication, and this is what? It's readiness and motivation. Second principle is the principle of competency and worth. What is competency and worth? When the communicator and the receiver, both of them, basically they should be quite competent and efficient in terms of communicating and also in terms of receiving the desired information or message. What does it mean? Like somebody is saying, like a teacher is communicating something, and if the student is not ready or the student is not competent enough to get the lecture or the topic which the teacher is communicating, then there is no any meaning of that communication. That topic is going to get to lose its worth. So basically it is very much important that the competency should be in the communicator as well in the receiver. So there is a great need of development of the required communication skills so that the task of communication in terms of transmission and receiving may be performed by both the entities in an effective and proficient way, and then only it is possible to make a proper communication in a best possible way. So we can say that a source of communication, uh, when the source of communication or the communicator is a teacher, this teacher should be imbibed with sufficient knowledge, which should be coupled with skills and application components or related to that topic which is to be transacted. Then only this teacher or the communicator will be in a position to go for a very kind of flow of communication which is going to be received by the receiver. In this case, the receiver will be the student. So in this way, there will be a fluid communication happening between the teacher and the student, or the communicator and the receiver. And this is something which is naturally and you can say very, very swiftly happening. So that is why we can say that this principle which says that competency and worth is something which should be there can be considered a very important principle of communication. The next principle is the principle of sharing and interaction. Like what exactly we mean by sharing or interaction? When we are sharing our thoughts, what we are doing some sort of interaction. So since the communication is a two-way process, its success lies in allowing as much sharing of the ideas and keeping some sort of mutual interaction between the source of the communication. In this case, we can take the example of a teacher and the receiver, which here in this case can be a student. So if there will be a two-way interaction happening, then we can say that the entire communication will be considered as a very successful communication. So this is this can be said that greater the interaction, more will be the involvement and participation of the students in the teaching learning process, and it will definitely bring positive results to the process of communication. So that's why it is always suggested for a teacher to make the class lively, where not only the teacher is speaking and speaking and speaking, the student should also in a position to speak up, to cross question, to interact with the with other students or maybe the teacher, so that the process of entire teaching learning is going to become a kind of a knowledge uh, extracting process where people are sharing their thoughts and interactions are happening. So that is why this principle of sharing and interaction is considered again to be a very important principle. The next principle is the principle of timeliness. See, timeliness or punctuality is something which is important in every walk of life. But here, this principle states that communication should be done at proper time so that it helps in implementing the plans. If we delay the communication, then the purpose will be defeated. The purpose, sole purpose of that particular communication will be defeated. And then, if it is done at the point when that particular time has gone, when it was very much required, then it will just become uh, mere, you can say a point which can be discussed in the history, or it will have some historical importance, but it will not be making any change in the present of the entity. So that is why it is very important to make the communication at the proper and appropriate time when it is desired. So that is why this principle is taken up here, and this is the principle of timeliness. The next principle is the principle of suitability of the communication contents. We all know that content is very important in any of the communications. And what is to be communicated in a communication process should be very much appropriated, or you can say it should be decided on the part of both the communicator and also on the part of the receiver. So the communicator, in this case, if the communicator is a teacher, must be able to handle the communication contents for being transferred to the receiver, which in this case is the student. And the student should also be ready, the readiness should be there to accept that content. It should not be beyond their heads, like the difficulty level of the content which is being transacted should be according to the previous knowledge which this child or the student is having. So in this way, at the receiving end, the communicated material should be suitable enough for being grasped and responded. So we always have to take care of the what exactly is the previous knowledge level of our students. When we start a lesson or a discussion, we have to check, we have to make a kind of assessment, a prognostic assessment, that at what level our students are. And then only we have to start transacting our topic, so that there should not be any communication gap or any type of information loss, because there is a possibility that if we are starting it somehow at a difficulty level which is not attained by the students, then the entire process is going to lose its worth. The worth is lost because the students will not internalize what the teacher is basically trying to say. So the communicated material should have a definite purpose. There should be a cohesiveness and appropriations in the light of the objectives which are set in the beginning itself, and the situation which is prevailed at the time of communication. So we have to take care of that. What exactly is the scenario, at, and what are the objectives which we are keeping in mind when we are starting transaction. So all these things are to be taken care of, and that is why this principle of suitability of the communication contents is there, and which is considered to be an important principle of communication. The next principle is the principle of adequacy. It is a little bit similar to the earlier one. It says that the information communicated should be adequate and complete in all respects. We should not, or we should never ever provide incomplete information or inadequate information, because inadequate information may delay the action and it can also create confusion, and this confusion can be the starting point of bigger confusions and bigger mistakes. So inadequate information also affects the efficiency of the receiver. So adequate information is essential for taking proper decisions and making actions, or making any type of plans, or if we are trying to accomplish some task, whatever planning we are doing, that particular adequacy of information which we are having in hand is very, very much important. Then only we can be in a position to accomplish our plans which we are making at the particular moment. So this is the principle of adequacy. The next principle is the principle of appropriate media and the channel. Both media and channel can be taken up synonymously. So the effectiveness of the process of communication will lie in the appropriateness, quality, and the strength of the communication media, and also the channel through which we are making the communication. And therefore, it is very much worthy to make use of the verbal or the non-verbal or both the means and media for the efficient and effective flow of communication. We can use any form. We can go for verbal communication, we can go for non-verbal communication, or we can mix both types. Normally, we mix the types and we use both the channels or both the mediums. And similarly, as far as possible, the use of multimedia, where multiple sense organs are utilized. This use of multimedia should be preferred over the single or restricted use of media and channel of communication for the efficient and fruitful results. So multimedia exactly means that when we are using multiple mediums, when multiple sense organs are involved in the comprehension of the process, the effective communication will be happening if we are using these multiple channels or multiple media. So this one is the principle of appropriate media and channel. The next principle is the principle of attention. In order to make communication effective, the receiver's attention should be drawn towards the message. By message, I mean the content. People are different in behavior. We all know that every human is unique, and they all have different attention spans. They all have different levels of emotions. Their level of understanding and all sort of things are unique in nature, different in nature. So that is why we cannot go ahead and communicate in a very only one way, or in a similar manner. Every child is unique, and their understanding of level of every child is unique. So because they are unique, they have got different attention spans and emotions and all, so they may respond differently to that particular message. Now, when we are actually seeing or we are transferring the message, we have to take care of that. What is our audience, to whom we are transacting? What is the variety of students which we are having? So knowing the student is the most important thing for a teacher. Subordinates should act similarly as per the contents of the message. So when we are planning our class, we have to think of that how we are going to transact this topic, so that uh, we can attain the attention of every child and even the last child. So the act of uh, of a teacher is also to draw the attention of the students, and then they may the students, if their attention is drawn, then they are going to observe and they are going to follow the instructions, and they are also going to receive the communicated message in a proper way. So this is something which actually informs us that how this gaining attention is very important, and that is why it is always suggested for the student teachers and those who are beginners, that if you are starting a class with something which is going to help you out in gaining the attention of your students, your half work is done, because now the students are ready to listen to you, or whatever you are going to show, you are going to demonstrate, they are ready to actually observe all those things. So this is something where we have to work a lot. Every pupil teacher, every student teacher has to work a lot, because gaining attention is something which is very important, and that is why this principle of attention is considered to be an important principle of communication. The next is the principle of informality. We all know that formal communication is generally used for transmitting messages and other information. And sometimes the formal communication may not achieve the desired results. Then comes this informal communication, which provides effective and somehow the proper communication which is desired at that particular time. So informal communication may prove effective in such situations where the formal communication may not work. So management of you, like if you are using such type of informal communications for assessing the reaction of your students towards all those topics which you are uh, which are complicated and which you are trying to communicate, is something which is a innate quality, which should be an innate quality of a teacher. So if you are trying to convey something, you are trying to communicate a typical difficult topic which is difficult for the students to comprehend. If you are transacting it in a very formal and conventional way, and you feel that the comprehension is not happening, then you can just at that particular point you can go away with this formal communication and go ahead and use certain examples from your daily life, your the analogies from your own experiences, and you can actually try to let them understand that what exactly is this particular topic all about. So here the informal communication will help you as a teacher to bring up the comprehension level, or to strengthen your comprehension, and the communication will be effectively created in form of the understanding level of getting to the understanding level of the students. So that is why at times we can go for informal communication too in the classroom. So that is why this principle of informality, and this can be seen as an optional principle. If it is required, we can go for. So this is one of the principles of communication. The next is the principle of appropriate feedback. We all know that feedback is very important, and the communication basically enjoys its effective flow if it continues to receive the desired feedback from the receiver and vice versa. Because it is very important even for a teacher to know that whatever she is teaching is being attained by the students, and even the students are always in they always think of that whether the teacher is feeling that they are in a position to understand the topic or not. That is why the assessment, this formative assessment and all those things happen throughout the year while the classroom teaching learning process. So in the classroom, if a teacher gets the desired feedback from the students in terms of the quality of uh, the teaching efforts which this teacher is making in, it will definitely boost up the morale, and it will also give the desired direction to the future, or to the further efforts of the teacher. The teacher is going to plan accordingly. Whatever feedback she is receiving, according to the feedback, she is going to plan, she is going to strengthen her knowledge and uh, use of resources, whatever the students demand. On the basis of those demands, this teacher is going to equip herself uh, for teaching that particular topic. So the feedback is very important for a proper teaching learning process, and that is why the principle of appropriate feedback comes in origin. Now, the last principle is the principle of facilitators and barriers of communication. We all know that there are many intervening variables which lie between the source and the receiver of communication. And the way these variables affect, it can be positive or it can be negative. Or we can say that it can be favorable or adverse. It can be favorably acting or adversely acting on the functioning of the source and receiver. So because of these, this functioning of the source and receiver becomes a kind of decisive factor for the success or failure of communication. If there are a lot of hindrances, a lot of problems, transmission loss, then it can be a less effective communication. It can be a failed communication. But if there are all those situations which are very much conducive, everything is going on properly, and the sender and the receiver both are on the same page, then we can say that the communication process is happening in a proper way. And therefore, it should be arranged, like we should arrange our communication process, which should be eliminating the barriers of communication as much as possible. Although there are several barriers which are somehow very like they come in. We try to stow away from those, but at times they come in. But we just try to make the barriers of communication very much eliminated from the process of communication. And uh, because this particular topic of facilitators and barriers of communication is having a lot of other issues, so that is why it will be discussed in a separate session, and we will be detailing on these barriers and what exactly they all mean and how they actually work on the process of communication, how the facilitators help the process of communication. So all these things will be discussed separately. So this was all about the different principles of communication. So let us just try to recapitulate what we have studied today. We have studied the principles of communication which are followed for making the process of communication effective and successful. And these are all, that is why they all are termed as the principles of communication. The notable ones which we have discussed are the principle of readiness and motivation, then principle of competency and worth, principle of adequacy, then principle of sharing and interaction, then the principle of suitability of the communication, of communication content, the principles of timeliness, the principle of appropriate media and channel, principle of appropriate feedback, and the principle of exercising proper control over the facilitators and the barriers of communication. So this is all about today. We will see each other in another session where we will be detailing more about some of the other aspects of communication. Till then, thank you so much. And these are few of those references and suggested links which were used while creation of this particular topic. You can also go ahead and study more with the help of these particular suggested links. These are helpful if you want to elaborate your study related to communication. Dear students, you were watching a video on communication and interaction, and in this lecture we discussed in detail about the principles of communication. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the homebound situation of COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.
Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome, dear learners. This is a video for the subject of education, for the course of Bachelor's in Education, and for the paper of Educational Technology Part 2. This video lecture is going to discuss about communication and interaction, and in this lecture we will be focusing on the facilitators and barriers of communication. This lecture is recorded by Dr. Iram Khan. The course coordinator and the presenter of this video is Dr. Iram Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. The academic expert or the reviewer of this video is Professor Jasim Ahmed from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha Channels of Ministry of Education, Government of India. Hello, my dear students. I am Dr. Iram Khan, Assistant Professor at Institute of Advanced Studies in Education, Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today, we will be discussing on the topics related to communication and interaction, and this lecture is going to focus on the facilitators and barriers of communication. Let us start the lecture first with the objectives. The objectives of this session are to discuss the various facilitators of communication and to describe the barriers of communication. First of all, we will be discussing that what exactly we mean by the facilitators and the barriers of communication. We all know that the effectiveness of communication very much depends on the presence or absence of the various elements and also the conditions which are facilitating or obstructing the proper flow of communication. In fact, these elements or situations, they very effectively play the role of the intervening variables in either helping or hindering the process of communication by standing between the communicator. In few of the cases, we can say that the teacher is the communicator, which can be the independent variable or the source, and the receiver. And in few of the cases, we can take the student as the receiver, who is the dependent variable. So in this way, these are always in a position to increase or decrease the effectiveness of the communicator, the strength of the communication media, the power of the receiver, and the quality of the communicated message by their typical nature and characteristics, which is either going to make a little bit help in the process of a communication, or maybe will be creating some sort of hindrance. So in this particular lecture, we will be discussing about that what exactly are those features, the characteristic features of the facilitators of communication, and also some of those barriers who are very much important and can be taken care of while making a while making an effective communication, either inside a classroom or anywhere else in the society, or on any of those places, the workplace or any other place. So as a matter of common experience, we all are aware that the role of the physical and the psychological factors, they are inherent in the environmental situations, or the conditions in which the person is, the conditions which are prevailing at the time of communication, when the communication is taking place. So the favorable situations, when we are having a very kind of calm and quiet environment, or when there is no any stress in the environment, there is no tension free mutual interaction is happening, there is proper climate, and like if we are having a very hot weather and there is no any kind of like aeration or ventilation, that is also something which will be adverse. So if we are having proper climate and the weather conditions are also conducive, and proper facilities in terms of using the multimedia or the devices which are being used as the media of communication, they all collectively play wonders in enhancing the effectiveness of the communication process. But on the contrary, if we just see the other side, if there are unfavorable conditions or the situations which are at that moment when the communication is happening, they are not according to the needs of that particular scenario, these adverse situations can be very much uh, creating a kind of obnoxious situation, or you can say hindrance in the process of communication. What can be these the forms of these hindrances? It can be some sort of noise, or if there is indiscipline in the class, or maybe in the scenario where the communication is being taking place, or improper physical facilities, non-availability of appropriate aid or material, or there is a possibility that the material is available but the person who has to handle the material is not trained enough to use that material. That is also some sort of hindrance. So lack of training, then mutual conflicts and tensions, improper climate and weather. These weather conditions are also very, very important, and we have to take care of that how we are going to make the situation where the communication is going to take place very much friendly. See, all these play or may play havoc by disharmonizing the process. So if there is disequilibrium in any of these, then we can find that these particular situations can be very troublesome for the process of communication. So as a communicator and the receiver or organizer of the program, or maybe the classroom, or if there is a talk show or any sort of communication activities happening, we must be fully aware of the nature and effect of the facilitators and the barriers of communication. And we all know that the facilitators are the friends or companions of all the factors and things that cater for the effectiveness of communication. And these should be therefore provided due encouragement, and also some sort of incentivization can be done, or maybe we can see that how these are going to be facilitated properly. And one should always try to have provisions for any such type of facilitators, and as many as possible we should be taking care of that these facilitators should be there once the communication is taking place. However, on the other hand, we should take care of that the barriers must be taken as the negative and detrimental force. Like they can be the game changer. They can be something which is going to actually tarnish the entire process, or whatever we have the efforts we have made. If there are a lot of barriers in between the process of communication, the entire efforts are going to fail. So we have to make a lot of effort to keep them totally away, or to reduce their impact on the communication process. These barriers may diminish and distort the quality of the signals which are sent to the receiver, or you can say that by the sender, the communicator is sending those codes or signals, and the receiver is accepting. So these barriers can be making distortions in the quality of the signals. So the connection between the two, the communicator and the receiver, is going to get less strengthened if there is the intervening of these barriers. So we have to always take care of all these things, that we shall be identifying the barriers which can come in between, and we have to see that how we can avoid, or take them away totally from the process of the communication. Let us try to just chalk out few of those facilitators which are very much helpful for the process of communication. So the first can be, like we have just discussed, calm and quiet environment, then proper physical facilities. Physical facilities can be if the equipment is properly provided, there is all those situations which are very much required for the proper communication. Those come under the edges of physical facilities. So they all should be very much proper. Then there should be no any tension or stress. So tension-free mutual interaction is again one sort of facilitator. Then proper weather conditions, and we cannot make the weather conditions change, but what we can do, we can just see that how if there is a lot of the weather conditions are too harsh, then we can make the physical facilities available which can mellow down the harshness. So if there is a lot of the weather is too cold or too hot, we can just try to make some sort of facilities available, so that the communication process which is happening, the communicators and the receivers can sit properly and uh, listen to what exactly is being said, and the person who is saying can also be comfortably communicate. Then proper facility of using the multimedia. This is something which at times becomes the most important facilitator. If a person is in a position to handle the equipment, the multimedia equipment, and also is in a position to manage all those sort of aids which are considered to be the audio or visual aids, or maybe the magnification devices, then the process becomes automatically very much easier and swift. So, and on the other hand, if there is any problem in using these material, the multimedia and or the aids which are being provided, then that provision of that aid also becomes a kind of uh, adverse situation. So we have to see that if we are providing some multimedia equipment, some devices, then we should properly train the person who's going to use that, or we should be having some people, some technical experts who can help the person out once the help is required. So these are all the facilitators which can be helpful in the process of communication. Now let us come to the barriers. And if we talk about the barriers can be two types. They can be of two types. They can be the internal barriers or the external barriers. So first we will focus on the internal barriers. So the roots of the internal barriers of communication lie in the sender and the receiver of the message. What can be these? Let us take one by one, we can discuss that what exactly these are. poor physical health or illness. If any of the two, either the communicator or the receiver, any of the two, or the group who is receiving the communication, if they are not in a proper state of mind because of the illness or some bad health, then the process automatically gets some sort of hindrances. So this is the first internal barrier. The second one is poor background in terms of previous learning and general knowledge about the subject of communication. So when the communication is being made, the communicator should always be focusing on that what exactly is um, the difficulty level of in which she or he is communicating, and the comprehension is happening or not, whether the previous knowledge related to the present communication is with the audiences or not. So if we are communicating a topic, we should always be, as a teacher, we should always be aware of that what is the general understanding of regarding that topic of our learners. So in case they don't have the general idea, we first have to make them know that what exactly is the general premises, and then only we can go for the complicated things. So this is something which we have to take care of. If the background check is not happened, then the entire communication is going to fail. So this is the second internal barrier. So the poor background in terms of previous learning and general knowledge, uh, if it is not checked and without checking the communication has been started, then it can be a internal barrier or hindrance in the process of the, the communication. Then the next is the poor mental health and improper psychological makeup. Like if a person is having some sort of prejudice, or the person is not in a mood to listen to, non-attention or feeling of insecurity, or there is some sort of anxiety, there is some sort of fearfulness related to anything, or the person is in depression, or there is some sort of dissatisfaction at both the ends, either at the end of the communicator or the end of the like this receiver, then this poor mental health condition can be a very important internal barrier, because because of the this particular case of this poor mental health and improper psychological condition, the entire crux of the communication is going to fade away. So this is also to be taken care of, and it is again a very important internal barrier of communication. Then the next is the handicap in understanding the symbolic expression, verbalisms, graphical representations, etc. What exactly it actually mean? If we are not prepared enough, that whatever are the nitty-gritty, if we are explaining something to an audience and there are a lot of graphical representations or concept maps or flow charts, or maybe there are some sort of diagrams and all, and as a communicator we are not in a position to explain it properly, or if we are explaining but still the audiences, the receivers are not in a position to comprehend it, then this particular case is going to become the internal barrier in case of uh, getting this communication becoming an effective communication. So this handicap in understanding the symbolic expressions, verbalisms, or graphical representations can be another sort of internal barriers. Let us come to the external barriers. What exactly we mean by the external barriers? So the roots of the external barriers of communication lie in the environmental conditions which are prevailing at the time of communication. So these are somehow those circumstances which are external in nature. So let us try to see one by one what exactly these communication barriers are. The first one is noise and other similar distractors. Then the polluted environment. Invisibility. Invisibility means if there is like if there is a big audience and communicator is communicating, and she or he is also making some sort of explanations on the blackboard or on the whiteboard, and the audiences are not able to see it properly, visibility is not that good. In that case, this invisibility of that explained material is going to be considered as the external barrier. Then the next is the environmental and physical discomfort. What exactly it means? Environmental and physical discomfort when we are sitting. Like suppose we are in a class and we have to take this class for a long time, or maybe a lecture which is of 50 minutes or 1 hour long, maybe 45 minutes long, and the seating arrangement is not very much comfortable. We are having discomfort, or there is like a mad rush in the class and we have to share seats. At that particular moment, this physical discomfort in the environment, maybe one of the examples is the seating arrangement, can be the external barrier, which is going to distract the person who is receiving the message, because the focus is right now shifted to the seating arrangement or to the physical discomfort which this person is feeling. So this is also one of the external barriers. Then the next is the improper functioning of the communication channels involved uh, while the audio visual materials or any sort of equipment which is being used is actually the part of the communication. So if the suppose the mic is not working, or the speakers are not working, in that case what will happen, the people, like those who are the receivers, they will be struggling to listen. So the use of this audio visual material is because we want to express, or we want to send the message in a very proper way. But what is happening, because of the hindrance, because of the disturbance in this mic or in the speakers, the receivers are not in a position to actually listen to the communication. So these are also the external barriers. Improper functioning of the devices. Then non-cooperative or unhealthy rivalries, competitions among those who are participating in the process of communication, that can also be a very obnoxious activity and can be considered as the external barrier. Then lack of proper motivation and lack of incentives, lack of zeal and enthusiasm, which is needed to remain active on the part of the sender and the receiver. If all these things are lacking, or any of the things are lacking, in that case also we can find that the communication is not happening in a proper way, and they are considered as the external barrier of communication. So let us now recapitulate what we have studied in terms of the facilitators and the barriers of communication. We saw that the effectiveness and the success of a process of communication depends on the quality of the role, and this role can be either positive or negative, played by the elements or components associated with the process of communication. And as a communicator, receiver, or organizer of the process, we must be quite conscious about exercising proper control over the facilitators and the barriers of communication. And where we can see that on one hand we must do our best to give proper incentives and encouragement to the facilitators, and on the other hand we must try to keep the process of communication free from the negative impacts of the barriers as far as possible, so that we can ensure the desired success of that communication which is happening either inside a classroom or in any of the walks of life. So we have what we have to do. We have to facilitate those things which are helpful, and we have to actually, as far as possible, make sure that the unwanted conditions or the barriers should not become the factors which are going to make this process of communication unsuccessful. So this is the key of making a proper communication in a very effective manner. So this was all about today. This Facilitators and barriers of communication are very important in terms of making the effective communication. So we will be discussing about many other topics related to communication in other sessions. There are a few of those references and the suggested further links which can be seen for studying more about these facilitators and the barriers, and make sure that you are always using the right type of scenario when you are making a communication in either inside a classroom or maybe outside the classroom in other places. Thank you so much for today. Let us see each other in another session another time. Dear learners, you were watching a video on communication and interaction, and in this particular session we discussed about the facilitators and barriers of communication. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the homebound situation of COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.